Before we dive in, if you into deep, meticulously researched history that hits hard, subscribe now and tap like so more people find this story. Then let's go back to the night a Nazi diary started to crack an empire of lies. The 4th of June, 1943, Railroad Street, Mexia, Texas. A pencil trembles in the hand of Unteroffizier Werner Burkhardt as he risks punishment to write what he is not supposed to think. How could any country at war, on two fronts, blaze with this much light? Through the Pullman window he sees farmhouses glowing, shop windows lit, street corners bright, at 10 p.m. A constellation of electricity across Texas, while the Reich has lived in blackout since 1940, and German farms, before the war barely knew electrification. He and 1,850 veterans of Rommel, S. Afrika Korps, step down, not from cattle cars, but cushioned coaches with dining service, as the entire town turns out, unaware they are witnessing the first fracture in a belief system about to be dismantled, not by slogans, but by a ruthless arithmetic of production that will rewrite these soldiers' understanding of enemies, homeland, and cause. The collapse began on May 13, 1943, in Tunisia, when General Jurgen von Arnim surrendered with roughly 250,000 Axis troops, the desert veterans who had driven the British to Egypt and earned Montgomery. So respect, suddenly prisoners. Among them, Hauptmann Friedrich Radke, Iron Cross, First Class, twice wounded, whose recovered diary would become a lens into captivity, as psychological shock. The road from defeat to revelation starts in Oran, Algeria, as Radke and tens of thousands wait in cages for transport. American efficiency slices through assumptions. Thousands processed daily, ID cards with photographs, medical exams, inoculations, Geneva rights, explained in fluent German, by officers prepared for this exact moment. Then the food hits like a hammer. White bread, real coffee, meat twice a day. Obergefreiter Hans Miller will tell his mother months later that what seemed like stage theater was merely standard rations. The ships waiting offshore embody the same lesson. Liberty ships, like the SS Robert E. Peary, thrown together in 4 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes, roll off yards at up to 3 a day, and as they return from Europe, they carry human cargo, by summer, up to 30,000 pounds a month. During the 2-week Atlantic crossing, Feldwebel Kurt Zimmermann notes that the crew discards more food daily than his company saw in a week during the final months in Africa. Not as mockery, but because supply feels limitless. Guards chat about a fleet of 2,710 standardized freighters built from $250,000. Part kits sourced across 32 states. Engines assembled from interchangeable subunits that spring from factories barely existing 2 years prior. And Lieutenant Colonel Wilhelm von Steuben, a Prussian from a line of officers reaching back to Frederick the Great, watches radar spin on a cargo ship and realizes technology he thought rare as basic equipment here. He feels, for the first time, Germany may already have lost. The 2nd of August, 1943, Norfolk, Naval Base. Docks stretching for miles across 4,300 acres. Cranes loading and unloading dozens of ships at once. A single port moving more tonnage in a day than Hamburg in a week, with parking lots full of workers, cars where in Germany private automobiles are for the privileged and the promised Volkswagen remains vapor. The prisoners march past all this abundance toward trains that are not. 48 wagons, but air-conditioned Pullman cars with padded seats that become berths, dining cars with tablecloths and silver, observation cars with panoramic windows. Radke records a sergeant apologizing for inadequate air conditioning in August and realizes what they considered luxury as routine. Then comes the 3-day lesson that does what no battlefield could. Through Virginia, night towns blazing with neon and shop windows, factories lit for third shift, parking lots full at midnight. In Roanoke, a half hour of mechanized loading replaces the hours a German yard would take, with automated coal loaders and electric pumps. Workers wear leather boots. A Berlin laborer could, to afford, drink Coca-Cola, toss half, smoked cigarettes, and Feldwebel Heinrich Müller, an electrical engineer from Siemens, calculates that 1 yard burns more electricity in an hour than his Berlin district uses in a day. The waste looks like a signature of infinite resource. Tennessee and Kentucky bring the horizon. Wide plants. The Alcoa works stretch 3 miles, its furnaces drawing 175,000 kilowatts. More than Munich, near Louisville, 4 synthetic rubber plants rise from fields in 18 months to produce 800,000 tons a year, while Germany, inventor of the process, never breaks 120,000. Oberleutnant Erich Hoffmann, an IG Farben chemist, recognizes columns and crackers beyond anything built at home, and there are multiple such facilities, with dozens more nationwide. The train passes Ford S. Willow Run, a 9-month miracle, turning out a B-24 every 3 minutes, 42,000 workers, 1.5 million parts, 1,500 subcontractors, 2.5 million square feet of floor. Luftwaffe Hauptmann Werner Kleist counts 17 bombers on the lines and abandons the lie of inferior American planes when he sees the precision and realizes the truth. These machines are not worse, they are impossibly numerous. In Saint Louis, the prisoners cross the Eads Bridge over a river, choked with grain barges carrying more than Germany, harvested in 1942, with elevators on both banks swallowing crops that could feed cities. Unteroffizier Karl Schmidt, son of a Bavarian farmer, watches a single barge loaded with enough wheat to feed his village for 5 years, while the crane operator eats a sandwich thicker than their weekly meat ration. In Kansas City, the stockyards and meatpacking plants stun them. Beef for lunch in the open air. Jeff reader Paul Fisher writes that Americans eat meat the way Germans wish they could eat bread, and a guard casually buys 20 hamburgers for 15 cents each with a single dollar. Camp Hearn, Texas, erected in about 4 months for thousands of prisoners, greets them with wooden barracks that have lights, flush toilets, hot showers, steam heat, and a hospital that makes German civilian clinics look threadbare. Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Friedrich Bauer, chief surgeon of the 164th Light Division, finds X-ray machines, stocked pharmacies, and what he calls a miracle drug he had known only by rumor. Penicillin used without hesitation on prisoners with minor infections, while German soldiers die for lack of sulfa. In the kitchen, walk. In refrigerators, hum beside industrial mixers and gas ranges, feeding 5,000 men. Surplus is mandated to guarantee full rations. And Feldwebel Otto Krebs, a former hotel chef, writes that he wept as they threw out good bread, because regulations oversupplied by design. By September 1943, labor shortages pull POWs into fields and factories that are not directly war production. They ride unblindfolded across a heartland of tractors, trucks, and electrified farms. A cotton gin outside Houston, powered by a New Deal River project, processes, in an hour, what a village could manage in a month, and Unteroffizier Herbert Lang notes that the owner is no aristocrat or party man, just a farmer with electricity, running water, a car, a truck, a tractor, whose workers, including black laborers, eat lunches richer than German weekly rations as an everyday norm. In Nebraska, sugar beets a single combine replaces 100 men. Fields stretch like seas, yields of 60 bushels per acre, where Germany would dream of 30, and Jeffreiter Wilhelm Hoffmann watches a 16-year-old drive a tractor worth more than his father earned in a lifetime, and laugh that it isn't. Even a particularly good one because a newer John Deere is coming. Factories provide the most brutal lessons while staying within Geneva rules. At a Campbell's soup plant, elderly men and women with a skeleton crew run automated belts, filling lines, and steam retorts that process in a day what German factories do in a month. Stabsfeldwebel, Ernst Wagner marvels, as one old woman manages controls. That would require 50 workers in Germany, drinking coffee and listening to the radio as machinery hums. Near Detroit, POW's unloading Coal Glimpse, the River Rouge complex. A 100,000 worker giant feeding jeeps, aircraft engines, and tanks, drawing 1.5 million kilowatts daily, outstripping Hamburg, while parking lots overflow with workers, cars often two, per family, a statement of class inversion that German officers find surreal. By winter 1943, American intelligence officers begin to name what they are watching: ideological collapse syndrome, the Special Projects Division records, growing requests for newspapers, books, and courses. Major Paul Newland notes by December that prisoners no longer debate production statistics. They have seen too much. The most committed Nazis go quiet. Pride contracts to a brittle loyalty to Germany, minus claims of victory, and camp newspapers such as Der Ruf tilt from defiance toward discussions of democracy, economics, and reconstruction as editors cultivate anti-Nazi contributors and discover a widening audience. The next blow comes from Italy's surrender. Former allies who agree to cooperate are organized into Italian service units, paid more, housed better, and granted freedoms. Germans who once lorded over them watch in disbelief as Italians work freely, dine in American restaurants, and even date American women. Hauptmann Friedrich Schulz observes that the Americans show no hatred to those who switched sides, and the contrast gnaws at the Nazi moral frame. Then comes Christmas, 1943 to 500,000 packages from American churches and civic groups arrive for enemy prisoners. Choirs sing German carols in a Texas chapel. Women send baked goods. Boy Scouts deliver handmade cards. The feast: turkey, ham, potatoes, vegetables, pies, ice cream, matches what American families eat at home. Feldwebel Hans Richter writes that they eat like kings, better than generals or party men. And the guards shrug. This is a typical American Christmas. If prisoners eat like this, what must frontline soldiers draw from the same empire of supply? By early 1944, more than 40,000 Germans enroll in education programs. 30,000 take English. 15,000 tackle vocational training. 8,000 join university correspondence. The University of Chicago ships courses. Stanford sends professors to teach democracy and economics. Camp libraries, grown with millions of volumes. American newspapers with differing views are freely available to men raised under total censorship. Hauptmann Dr. Wilhelm von Braun, a physicist conscripted from the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, attends lectures on atomic physics and is struck that Jewish refugee scholars teach enemies without malice, radiating a universalist ethos of science years ahead of German research. In camp theaters, Hollywood plays not propaganda, but Gone with the Wind and the Grapes of Wrath. Lieutenant Joseph Kramer is stunned that Americans show defeat and social crisis to an enemy audience and grow stronger through candor. Meanwhile, labor expands at Higgins in New Orleans. POWs unload steel that becomes landing craft at a rate of about 700 a month with 20,000 parts. Per Volt Essel, in a yard where women run cranes and weld hulls and teenagers drill, while Stabsfeldwebel Kurt Zimmermann writes that every assurance they'd been given about democracy's inefficiency collapses in a 24/7 production schedule. At Republic Steel, they watch 10,000 tons a day flow from blast furnaces, ore trains endless, coal trains relentless, and Oberjeffreiter Paul Hartmann X. Krupp concedes the spillage here exceeds what some German mills produce. Summer 1944, harvests level the last economic myths. Across the plains, combines harvest 100 acres a day. Single farms ship grain that dwarfs provincial output. Elevators hold more wheat than Germany imports in a year. And Unteroffizier Franz Weber sees aerial photos of wheat oceans. Thousands of square miles. enough to survive catastrophic losses and still feed America and allies. In California, Central Valley, orchards run to the horizon. Fruit with minor blemishes is discarded. Crops are sometimes plowed under to stabilize prices. Jeffreader Otto Schulz watches mountains of oranges, bulldozed, and begs to send them to starving families in Germany, only to be told it impossible, and understands, sick to his stomach, that even waste is a function of surplus. The 6th of June, 1944 arrives, and with it, the final shattering image set. Newsreels show 6,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, 150,000 men in the first wave, artificial harbors anchoring a supply machine that moves 15,000 tons a day onto open beaches. Prisoners at Camp Shelby watch the film and feel not merely the loss of a war, but the evaporation of a worldview built on racial hierarchy and heroic scarcity. Oberst Friedrich von Steuben writes that Germany hurled horses at trucks, rifles at automatic weapons, faith at factories. Yet the element that corrodes Nazism most thoroughly is not steel, but mercy. When Jeffreader Hans Miller learns his child has died in Hamburg, the camp commander delivers the Red Cross telegram, personally, with condolences. When Lieutenant Paul Fisher, his wife writes of feeding their children, American church groups assemble food parcels for an enemy civilian in a bombed country. Captured doctors collaborate with American staff on surgeries. Mental health care is provided instead of punishment. Suicide attempts lead to counseling, and Dr. Bauer writes that compassion for enemies reveals a confidence they had mistaken for weakness. By March 1945, the education program's metrics are startling. Over 25,000 volunteers for democracy courses, 135 camp newspapers, discussion circles on constitutions, free markets, civil rights, officers drafting notes on applying American agricultural methods at home. Men who arrived as true believers, now writing about rebuilding a democratic Germany. Some prisoners even asked to remain in the United States. Others marry American women through correspondence. Thousands will emigrate in the 1950s. In April, as the camps of Europe are liberated, films and testimonies reach POWs. Disbelief gives way to confirmations from letters out of Germany. Men who clung to a notion of German honor break under the moral fact of the regime's crimes and admit they were used by criminals masquerading as saviors. Repatriation follows in 1945. SIF, American authorities prepare prisoners with vocational training, agricultural education, and political instruction. They learn of a reconstruction program that the world will know as the Marshall Plan. And Oberst von Steuben writes that the victors gave them skills, knowledge, and hope instead of revenge. In total, 371,683 German POWs passed through camps across 45 states, part of 425,871 Axis captives. 175 main camps and 325 branches rise in about 90 days apiece. Prisoners contribute roughly 14 million man-days to agriculture, process 100 million board feet of lumber, and earn 80 cents per Dalton Y while filling labor gaps in 46 states. There are only 222 escape attempts, about 0.6%, with no permanent successes and no civilians harmed. 95% will later rate their treatment as good or excellent. 74% will say captivity changed their worldview. Fewer than 1 in 10 will cling to strong Nazi beliefs by war. Some 5,000 will immigrate post-war. More than 12,000 will maintain correspondence with American families for decades, averaging 31 years of letters. A cohort will help shape post-war West Germany. Hans Kroll from Camp Shelby will become ambassador to the U.S. Walter Hallstein from Camp Como will chair the European Commission. Werdiger von Weckmar from Camp Herne will represent Germany at the UN. Edward Ackerman from Fort Robinson will lead agricultural reform, carrying American methods into German industry, farming, and politics, contributing to the Wirtschaftswunder. Years later, Dr. Arnold Kramer, a leading historian of the POW experience, will argue that the United States won the propaganda war through reality itself. Every full plate, every working light, every clean toilet was an argument against Nazism more devastating than any leaflet. In 1985, on the 40th anniversary, over 500 former prisoners gather in Austin, Texas, many with families in tow, to show where the change began. Former Obergefreiter Hans Wecker, later a Maine physician, says life in the camps improved on cold, water flats in Germany, running water, central heat, abundant food. But above all, restored dignity. Former Stabsfeldwebel Kurt Meyer recalls Iowa farmers sharing meals and knowledge with enemy laborers while their own sons fought overseas. At the reunion dinner, former Oberst Hermann Goetz, no relation to the Reichsmarschall, summarizes the arc. They arrived as Nazis convinced of lies and left as Democrats who had seen the truth. American strength derived not from conquest, but creation, not from hatred but diversity, not from tyranny but freedom. They returned determined to build a Germany that prospers through peace. The applause that follows unites, 1. Time enemies around a transformation that began the night. Those Pullman coaches rolled into Mexia, and a secret diary dared to doubt. If this journey through shock, abundance, and moral awakening resonates with you, subscribe and hit like now, so the algorithm pushes this story to more curious minds. And let us keep going, because the final insight may be the most important. The scale of the enterprise frames the achievement. Over 500 camps in 45 states. Every state but Nevada, North Dakota, and Vermont, with capacities from 250 to 12,000, a peak population in May 1945. Waves of arrivals at 20,000 per month in 1943, 30,000 after D-Day, rising to 60,000 in the closing months. Agricultural output measured in tens of millions of man. Days lumber in 9. Figureboard, feet. Labor value in the hundreds of millions in $1,940. Education swells past 40,000 enrollments. 135 newspapers circulate. English classes, vocational tracks, and university courses proliferate. Escapes are rare and futile. Long-term friendships common. The statistics aren't just numbers. They a map of minds traveling from myth to reality, as prisoners discover that the most powerful weapon in America's arsenal is not the bomber or the tank, but the visible, tactile proof of what free people can build together. They came expecting a weak, divided, mongrel nation. They encountered an industrial colossus with a surprising core of humanity. They arrived as the Reich's warriors and departed as witnesses to democracy. Engine at full throttle. They were stunned by American industrial might. But what converted them was what that might revealed. A civilization confident enough to feed enemies well, to teach rather than humiliate, to prepare former foes to rebuild rather than to rot. If you still watching, you the kind of viewer who keeps serious history alive. So make sure you resubscribed and drop a like to help this channel unearth more of the stories that change how we see the past. In the end, the trains that delivered them in 1943 carried men pledged to a fantasy. The ships that returned them in 1946 carried citizens in embryo, ready to help build a democratic Germany. The economic miracle of the 1950s rose, partly on lessons learned behind American fences. Prosperity springs from freedom, not conquest, from human dignity, not racial arrogance, from cooperation, not total control. The German POWs, who saw the arsenal of democracy at its peak, became unwitting ambassadors of that model, carrying home the seed that would grow into the Atlantic Alliance, the Marshall Plan, and a rebuilt Europe. Their defeat became an education, their imprisonment, a liberation from ideology, and their story remains one of the clearest proofs that the most decisive victories are sometimes won not through destruction, but demonstration.